Both in lying and in telling the truth, people are guided by their beliefs concerning the way things are. These guide them as they endeavor either to describe the world correctly or to describe it deceitfully. For this reason, telling lies does not tend to unfit a person for telling the truth in the same way that bullshitting tends to. The bullshitter ignores these demands altogether. He does not reject the authority of the truth, as the liar does, and oppose himself to it. He pays no attention to it at all. By virtue of this, bullshit is a greater enemy of the truth than lies are. Now, you know, he used the word bullshit because it was flamboyant and it got people's attention, but he could just as well say polemic, or I think he could probably have said advocacy. What I'm suggesting is not that a lot of the literature that we read is necessarily right or wrong, but I'm saying that much of what we read as policy literature is in fact generated in the context of advocacy and has to be read as such. In other words, you cannot take at face value whether or not the arguments and the data are robust, because they are generated for a specific purpose. I thought that sort of, I thought that Frank, you know, the translation of Frankfurt's diatribe to the arts was like my aperçu, and for a while I was running around saying, you know, isn't this an interesting insight? But in fact, recently I see that there's a woman called Eleanor Belfiore, who is professor of assistant professor of cultural policy at University of Warwick, and she's actually, and it's online and it's very good, has written a paper called On Bullshit in Cultural Policy Practice and Research. So I'm no longer the only person suggesting this. In other words, that when we look at the literature, and a lot of it's grey literature, in other words, a lot of it is published by advocacy organizations. A lot of it is generated, as I say, in the context of a debate about securing resources. I think we have to be extremely fastidious in looking at those arguments. The trouble is, of course, that none of us have the energy to be fastidious, and very few of us have the appetite to be fastidious. What I mean by that is that if you take cultural policy as an area compared with, say, health policy or with environmental policy or transport policy, I think that one of the challenges is that the policy community is tiny and the policy community is very thinly resourced. So it's not as if there are great big institutes with serried ranks of researchers working their way through the data in order to attest the veracity. We know that most policy institutes are one or two people, and the policy community itself